welcome to ManchTalk. I'm Tammy Simmons.
And I'm Carla Garrick.
And we're glad that you're tuning in on this glorious summer weather week, month.
Summer!
Yay, summer! Today is, I believe, July 16th, Tuesday, July 16th, because that's when we tape on Tuesdays. This Saturday, it's supposed to be 98. And sunny. Yeah, that 98's a little much for me. I'd rather, 95 is more than sufficient. But
as long as it's not too humid.
If it's right, really I don't know what it's going to be. It says sunny, so that's usually better. But if you don't have air conditioning and you don't have a pool or anything, you just have to think. My house, you just don't stay where it's hot. Go to one of the public pools. We apparently have many of them. We have splash pads. I walked by, I don't know if I said this last week. I know I mentioned it to you. I walked by Rayco Pool one night at about like 6:30. So, and it was hot out. And there were only like 20 people there. So, I'm sure on the weekends they're probably busier, but there's a lot of...
Is that the pool just off Varney?
Yes, that's the one on between Head and Precourt Streets. And I was quite surprised that there were only that many people there. It was a weeknight.
I went hiking. I went walking, I guess, up at Rock Rimmon the other day, and the splash pad at DuPont. Also, that was pretty crowded, and it looked like the kids were having fun.
Yeah, I think the splash pad is a hit, and I think that's what they're talking about doing at the pool. Is it Hunt Pool? Because I think what happens is the pools end up needing repairs, and it's less expensive to put in a splash pad. It's also less expensive to run a splash pad. You don't have to have lifeguards. The liability is far lower. Whatever. But there's ways to stay cool. If you're not, if you don't have air conditioning, go see a movie.
Yep.
Sit in the air conditioning. Don't bake your brain in the 98-degree temperatures this weekend. I won't be baking my brain. I'll probably be sitting in a kayak on some body of water in New Hampshire.
Oh, kayaking. Thank you so much for taking us.
We went kayaking 2 weeks ago. We broke, we ingratiated, or whatever the word is.
It was my inaugural kayak on
I think we got
Lake,
another.
You say namaste.
It is a namaste.
It's namaste. Because I looked it up.
Namaste would be fun. We can call it namaste.
Okay,
but it's just the body of water that the Piscataqua runs through, going up towards Goffstown, and it's just a really, really nice kayak.
And we put it in Goffstown behind the women's jail over there or whatever. I know that's where my hearing was. Right? And then went all the way down to the ice arena, and 2 hours. It was great.
Really nice.
I'm hooked.
There are so many places. I say that I actually would love to do a show, and we should do some off camera, like we should video, because I do get really kind of frustrated with the negative commentary about Manchester.
Me too. I'm so glad you brought this up.
It's just, first of all, there are certain Facebook groups that should just be shut down because there's nothing positive about any of them. Like people that complain about every single thing. And I'm sorry, I have lived places that were dangerous. Manchester is not one of them. There are certainly things that can be improved in Manchester. Yes, we have a homeless problem. Yes, we have, opioid. Yes, we have panhandlers.
But that's also, if you look at the actual numbers of that, it's minuscule that we are talking about. So it's like, can we, for every negative thing,
can we talk about the good things?
Where else? I've lived all over the world, literally. And I was, every time I go down to the trails next to the ice arena and the West Side trails and stuff, I think, wow, this is so 5 minutes, 3 minutes really from my house. I'm off trail. I can take my dog off leash. It's safe. It's clean.
It's quietish.
Thank you, West Side.
No, but our kayak trip, we were 5 minutes from our houses. It wasn't like we were far. And there are endless places to walk. There are businesses you can go visit. There's so many good things. I know I saw last week was trolley night, and I saw you were down there. We have it.
There was this deluge of rain, so we actually.
That's why we didn't.
I met some friends at. I met one friend at the Courier, and we had coffee, and she brought her son, and then we ran into random other people who were there for trolley night with their kids. So it was just sort of fun and great. But even the Courier, that's a world class museum. I do art museums all over the world, and I will never forget when I went to the Courier the first time. And I was like, wow, this is a really awesome, cool museum.
So, I think there's just so much that's good about Manchester. You know, quite honestly, and this may make me sound like an awful person, I am so tired of hearing that rents are too high. I am so tired of hearing about the crime being out of control and that you can't walk down the street. Knock on wood. Maybe I just live in a miraculous part of Manchester, which I don't. I live on Barney Street. I live on a very busy street. The worst thing about my street is the loud motorcycles. And the number of cars. But I mean, I'm not worried about like somebody showing up on my doorstep or anything. I can walk the dog.
I mean, in fact, yesterday, because I am a little nervous, I think we do have, you know, a little bit of over-policing. And I have a really nervous dog,
yes.
right? She's a rescue. She actually cannot be left alone.
Yes.
So in summer, it becomes problematic,
you can't
right?
leave her in the car.
She'll
right.
jump in the car with me and she wants to go
Same.
with. And, you know, you can't leave her in the car. And yesterday, I had to return something to Target. And, you know, I actually left my car running with the AC
We've
on.
done that, too.
And I thought, you know, where else really genuinely can you just do this? And and I wasn't even, I mean, I
concerned, but not enough.
But I was like, no one's going to steal my car.
No.
In fact, I mean, what might happen is someone will just be like, why is the car running?
And there's, people get overly.
But,
well, I mean, we do the same thing. We drove away. We have a dog that's also a rescue. We usually crate her, but we're trying to leave her home. Like now. I left her home. I left her loose. Because she doesn't seem, all she wants to do is watch out the window and bark at things. Or lay on the bed. But, the other day we were driving away and I realized we never closed our inside front door and there's our dog, you know, looking out the window. And I was like, yeah, nobody's breaking through the glass. I'm like, you know, like that's just not going to happen. I mean, maybe it will someday and I'll say, oh, well, I guess I was wrong. But I get so tired of everybody talking about how terrible Manchester is.
You know, and you know, to the point, and maybe we can talk a little bit about our hearing. We had the hearing for the surveillance cameras last week. And, you know, that's sort of one of the the notes we're hearing, right, is the homelessness, and these cameras can somehow magically, first of all, they can't actually prevent any kinds of crimes.
I had people on Facebook say they were going to save lives, including one of my state reps who agreed with them that exactly these surveillance cameras were somehow, according to Representative Heidi Hamer, going to save lives. And I thought, and I asked, could you please explain, give me just an example of how that could be? And of course there isn't, because they're not going to.
Well, people have also sort of started to get confused about this sort of idea of like pre-crimes, right? I mean, I was thinking about it this weekend. I watched a documentary about I'm not going to go into all of it, but let's just talk about like a sort of intent of people. Yeah. So it was, the documentary was about that girl who ended up going to jail for encouraging her boyfriend to commit suicide.
Yes.
And there's a really interesting 2-part documentary on Netflix, right? So they ascribe all this intent to her that, you know, you're like, well, you know, do we know really, you know, you're trying to read someone's mind.
Right.
And of course, yes, that's
and
how the law works.
quantify their intentions.
Right. You know, I mean, there is sort of that idea of how you act, right? So if there is a act of murder, like homicide, right, where I killed you, and it's very clear why, right? But then, you know, we do for culpable homicide and reckless and wanton and all these sort of other intent forms. And, you know, I was like, this whole idea that we can pre-crime stuff, it's not going to work, right? So let's sort of move away from that thinking, move away from the thinking that this can prevent things. It can't. What it can do is probably make it a little easier to solve a crime after it's been committed, but that could just as equally happen through private cameras.
Right, I was going to say, any business if you owned, I don't know about you, but if I owned a restaurant downtown, of course I'd have a security camera, because it's just, you have a business.
Right. And it's in your interest.
You're protecting your own property and you're protecting your patrons.
Exactly. So so we had the hearing last Tuesday. It had been postponed for a week because the judge had actually previously worked for the ACLU, and so one of the parties had to sort of
recuse and say,
you know, So we had the head of the Superior Court, so Judge Naidu. She seems like a nice lady, was very on the ball, asked some really interesting questions. None of us testified, so it was basically, we were all there.
Yep.
Chief Capano was there with his lawyer, and the petitioners were there. And so they sort of had this conversation about, do we need these cameras? But I think the fundamental issue here is actually that there's a law in New Hampshire that says we're not allowed to have these cameras.
Yep.
So that should be the starting point, right? Yep. So there is a law that says if there's a camera that can capture, not shall capture, may capture, can.
Has the ability to.
Has the ability to capture a motorist's face or their license plate,
yep.
then that is strictly prohibited in New Hampshire. And that bill was actually introduced to try and shore up privacy
I was
going
to say, people were arguing that Neil Kirk doesn't have standing because this is in Manchester, and I'm like, oh no, he actually does, because he's led the charge when he was a state rep on a lot of these privacy issues. And there is language in our RSAs that maybe doesn't specifically talk about this particular type of surveillance camera, but there's language that most certainly leans us to say that this is what the intent of the legislative body is.
Well, and the other thing I find really interesting, definitely we talked about this on the show with the 2 constitutional amendments
yes.
that passed overwhelmingly,
yes.
both with over 80% support, right? So that's just on the street, standard granite staters who are like, yeah, we like the sound of these 2 things. And those 2 things were taxpayer standing,
yeah.
which means if you have
right.
if you have a beef with the government and you pay taxes,
yep.
you're allowed to say, yo, I have a beef with you, right?
You might not get anywhere, but you have the right to do it.
Yes, and that was in response to the courts and all their wisdom kind of saying, no, you know what, we're just going to say you don't
yes.
have standing
right.
anymore. So that was a response to that. And then the other one, of course, was 2B. Article 2B in the New Hampshire Constitution that now says, we don't want this much government intrusion in our lives. Now, that doesn't 100% fit
right.
in this case, but I think it does lend itself.
I was going to say, it's got the flavor of it. All of our, if you actually read the words, because words do have meanings, if you read the words in the Constitution now, or in various RSAs, and even more so, if you were involved for the discussion of how those bills became part of the RSA, I think it's fairly clear in New Hampshire, and we don't have to care about what other states do.
Right. And please stop caring about what other states
in New Hampshire, we respect the privacy of our citizens. And the government doesn't get to overstep into that privacy in a variety of ways.
Right.
And this does, because this says if I'm walking down Elm Street, the Manchester police have a right to videotape me and retain my image for 14 days. And there's nothing in this legislation or in this proposed thing that says they're not going to use facial recognition, that they're not going to record traffic patterns, like who's driving where. There is nothing that says actually, what they can and can't do.
By the city's own admission, they said in their pleadings that, yes, we will inadvertently record cars and motorists and whatever, but just trust us. And I'm like, well, that's not how the law works.
Right. And so, state laws, we have specific things spelled out about how long something can be retained, who can retain it, because you can't just say, just trust us.
Right. And the flip side, of course, is, we live in this society now where we've sort of, everything's topsy-turvy, yes. right? So we're supposed to be able to keep secrets, right? We're supposed to have privacy, right? We're supposed to be able to say, you're allowed to know this and this right. about me, but not this, right? And the government is supposed to, according at least to our Constitution and the right to know laws that we have here, is supposed to be open and transparent and accountable at all times
right.
to the people. But that's flipped. Yeah. So now it's like the state is saying we can know everything about you and we can surveil you, but we are going to keep secrets from you, like the Lori's list.
Right, and we had a conversation about the Lori's list with actually some friends from out of state that we saw over the weekend, and Dan was like, well, there's this list in New Hampshire of these cops that can't testify because they've been found guilty of wrongdoing or are untrustworthy or whatever, and the people listening to us are like, You have what? That's insane. And I'm like, yeah, it is kind of insane.
It isn't insane. It's actually, I think it's quite indicative that New Hampshire is a special place, and I don't think we should look at it negatively. I just think that that list should be public because
I think the idea of the list is perfect.
Right.
I just think it's bizarre that you and I can't know who's on it.
I mean, that's crazy. But all other states, people can't know. And in fact, in California, there's a case happening now where reporters. So it wasn't the AG's office as we have here, but reporters actually used criminal convictions to create their own California-based database of cops who were held criminally liable. Our list's a little different, right? This is all
more
internal.
About credibility.
It's internal because we're not prone to actually charging our people with malfeasance when it would have been a criminal case for any one of us. Right. It might not be. It might just be a personnel issue, in the state, so to speak. So in California, a court actually just recently found that even possessing that privately compiled list where it's based on public documents of criminal convictions is illegal.
How is that even possible?
It's crazy. I mean,
so if I make a spreadsheet of something, because that's basically what they did. Somebody made a spreadsheet of criminal convictions that happen to involve police officers and is sharing it.
Right.
And somehow, it's California, so.
Well, it's California, but I think it's also just indicative of this sort of flip.
Well, we do. We always, the fact that people were saying that our surveillance cameras were going to save lives, and I thought, I believe it. People might not always think this, but I do try to be very objective. Like when something comes up, I was reading an article about shoreline in Rhode Island and who has the right to walk on what shoreline and is it private? And I thought, well, now that's interesting because who does and where is the line? So I try to think about what is all sides of this. I'm really struggling to come up with how a camera being watched by a dispatcher at a different location is somehow how somebody's brain can say this will save lives. First of all, the police's job is not to save your life. The Supreme Court has said they are not there to protect you. Anybody who still thinks that the police are there to protect you, you're living in a bubble somewhere. The police are there to solve crime, to stop after the fact. That's the reality. So I'm not okay with being recorded in case somebody else down the road decides that they're going to come in.
Well, and the other thing is, and I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, right? But there's that idea of we don't even know what's illegal anymore.
No.
Like I wouldn't have known having that database of that list is illegal. Right. And there are myriad, literally hundreds of thousands of laws at this stage, right? So smart people have said, most of us commit at least 3 felonies a day. We probably did just kayaking. We probably broke some
fish and wildlife law. Yeah.
Who knows, right? So that's a concern, right? Because that'll have and then someone like me who likes to, have a little protests and stuff, at
God
City
knows
Hall
you're
from
up to
time
8
to time.
felonies a day, definitely.
Oh, and so will that have a chilling effect on the First Amendment? So I think when we look at these things, we can't just say, face value, these cameras are going to prevent crimes. It's like, how exactly?
Right.
There have been several
And if somebody
studies.
can make a case to me and say, well, I think it could do this, this, and this, then I might be like, I didn't really think about it that way, but I haven't come up with one yet.
But the studies, the only ones I can find, there's a surprising little body of work that supports any of the statist arguments I've heard for this. But there is, a fair amount of people who have said, well, these things don't work. So in a place like London, and actually there was a quote from the Department of Safety Assistant Commissioner Earl Sweeney in 2006.
Okay.
When they passed this highway
the camera thing,
the prohibition on surveillance, he actually said, you can have cameras in London, you can have cameras in New York, we cannot have cameras in general surveillance in New Hampshire. His own words. He also said, some police set up cameras to monitor downtown. We do not believe this usage would be allowed in New Hampshire without specific legislation in the future legalizing it. So my question is, just based on that, how is the judge going to say, either we have to say, well, they were all lying in 2006 in the State House. Everyone was lying then because they thought, no, we can do this later. or they're lying now.
Right.
But it's sort of like you can't have both of those realities.
It will be interesting. So is the judge going to make a determination just based on that one hearing?
So I mean, the pleadings, as it is with any like legal
like,
thing,
here you go.
it's already. I mean, my case was this much in the end, but it's already a pack like this. She's going to look at all of that. She hadn't read it before the hearing itself. I guess she sits in once a week,
right.
Or once a month.
Well, and somebody had already recused himself, so you're already out.
So we should hear in the next month, nice. I guess. I mean, I'm going to assume both sides.
And the police have decided not to do anything until they hear from the courts, I believe.
They did agree to that. We'll see if...
Well, I mean, in fairness, they probably should, because if they were found to be in the wrong, then somebody could financially sue them for damages. So
probably, yeah.
Just saying.
So.
Okay, so there you go. That's that. I do want to mention, because we were talking a little bit about the trolley night or whatever. So in town Manchester has their Summerfest series, and this Thursday, the 18th, they have the ukuleles.
Oh, cute.
They'll be down at the Veterans Park. That's the one with the big yellow tent, and they play there, and that's free, and it starts at like 7 at night, I believe. There's a concert every week.
Oh, wow.
Yep, every Thursday night. Next, in a couple weeks, we got Jimmy LaHoo's band, so that's kind of fun. That's on August 1st. But there's one every Thursday night, and then on August 29th, they're playing Jaws.
Oh, okay. They're showing movies and
stuff.
So
too, right? They used to do different movies. I don't think they get as much turnout, so they probably just did it on one. It probably costs more money to run the movie than a concert. So that goes on, and the farmers market is in full swing, so that runs, I think, from 3 to 6:30, and that's right across from Veterans Park, so you can go down and do all sorts of things. Walk down, definitely take a walk down the very safe Elm Street. Check out some of the local restaurants or shops or whatever. There's a couple little gift shops around, great coffee places. Carla and I have figured that out. But that's going on Thursdays. I want to make sure to say that. Before we run out of time, I do want to remind people, even though it's Tuesday, and by the time you see this, the week will probably be over, we're in the last week of filing period for municipal offices. What is interesting, besides the regular offices that we normally have, this year we have to elect a 9-member school charter commission, which I was like, where did this come from? Well, this is the bill. This came out as a result of the bill that Pat Long, who is a school board member in Manchester, state rep from Manchester, used to be on the aldermanic board. He put in a bill, House Bill 544. Basically, this requires, which bugs me because we always talk about local control, and right in the first words, a charter commission shall be established. So Manchester people don't get to decide, shall they do it? Can we just vote, no, we don't want a charter commission? Well, no, because somehow this got through on a voice vote. Shall establish a 9-member charter commission that if that charter commission...
Is this specific to Manchester?
Manchester School District Charter Commission established.
Wow.
Right. A charter commission shall be established to develop a procedure which does not require approval of the state legislature. It doesn't say state, but that's what they mean. To revise, amend, or replace the Manchester School District Charter. And then it goes on talking about all these different laws, and to be honest, I didn't have the time to figure out what any of that meant. Charter Commission shall submit its recommendations for a procedure to revise, amend, or replace the Manchester School Charter in the form of a ballot question to the Manchester School District voters for a vote tells us when, November 2020. So in this November's election, we will, I think it'll be in November, we'll elect 9 members.
For the charter.
That charter commission will get together and come up with a ballot question that'll be on 2020's ballot that will,
and if I understand,
change the city charter. It's very confusing about what the steps are because.
But basically, I think the takeaway is what's being attempted here is a runaround on the tax cap
and the ability
by creating
for the
second.
Yes, so right now the city has a charter and there's rules in there and there's rules about how they act too.
Ethics.
The ethics is all, so that's all in the city charter, which right now the school district is part of. This would give the school district a separate charter, which means the rules in the city charter, including the tax cap that was approved multiple times by the voters, would not apply to them. It would also, I believe, from everything I've heard, give the school district the ability to tax.
This sounds pretty bad.
This is really bad. But the good thing is that the voters we have to elect because it says shall. elect a 9-member commission, whether
And
we
so
want
is
to or
that
not.
nine, like
Anybody.
anyone
Well,
from
and
anywhere?
the language in here
Should
is.
I run for that?
Yes, you should. The charter. I thought the words even. This is how things get screwed up in law. The Charter Commission shall consist of 9 members who shall be registered voters of the Manchester School District.
What?
And who shall run without party designation. Who are the voters of the Manchester School District? Why wouldn't this say who are voters of Manchester? Or living in Manchester, or Manchester voters? So if the school district changes and it incorporates Hooksett, can we now elect people from Hooksett?
No, not according to that, because it has to be the Manchester School District.
But if, that's what I'm saying.
If they change the school district.
Right. So that's kind of weird and open-ended, bad language in my opinion. So what, the ballot, the
ballot is going to have like
there will be a separate ballot, I believe, like at least the second side of the ballot, I would assume. And it'll have a list of names. They won't tell you what party they belong to, so you'll have to probably pay attention and kind of figure it out, because there's going to be clear intentions.
Just vote for people that you actually know and who you think, like me, could do a good job.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm not going to vote for 9 people just because.
Although I'm like, also that sounds like one of the circles of hell.
Well, and I did kind of think it was. This is going to sound very ageist. I'm an ageist. Lou D'Alessandro signed up.
Wow, really?
And Mike Lopez signed up. Mary Frieda signed up, and I'm like, you're all. Sorry to say this, but you're all in the upper years, so you're going to be making decisions.
And I'm sorry, but
that are
you know
going to impact the younger people.
If we have challenges, which we do with the schools, let's not keep doing the same things we've been doing for the past 100 years or 82 years in Lou's case.
So that we'll have to have more information. We'll try to keep you all informed about, once the filing period closes this coming Friday, we'll have a list of who's running for what, and we can talk about that. I also did want to do a little bit of shout out. We only got a couple minutes. Saturday was the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance Liberty Dinner, which is always a great event. Hundreds of people come out in support of liberty efforts here in New Hampshire. They put out this guide it's the Liberty rating, and they rate all the state reps and senators. And in Manchester, we've got only 4 solid votes that come out of Manchester pro people. But
which is what you are if you're pro liberty.
And if you're watching us, you're probably not pro bad. But I did find it interesting, out of all the Democrats in the city, which there's like, a
lot,
17 of them or some craziness, the highest grade was a D+.
Wow.
And that went to Barbara Shaw, and Barbara Shaw is like the closest. She's the only one of the Democrats in Manchester that votes pretty well. A lot of them are considered constitutional threats, and they're D's or F's. So if you really believe in, liberty and freedom and your rights being protected and your privacy, you might want to relook at who you're all voting for state rep, because we seem to be sending really bad people up to Concord. People who think that if we put surveillance cameras on Elm Street, it's going to save lives. Nonsense. Anyways, we have a minute. What else? What else is going on? Anything?
Oh, man. I started a new podcast.
Awesome. I did see that. And I also heard you on the Tom Woods show.
Oh,
Dan and I heard
wonderful.
that. Wonderful.
It's called Told You So .media. People should check it out. It's me and my neighbor, Brink Slattery. He and I are just taking on issues, and we talk about Manchester. It's very Manchester centric. This is where we live. It's the city we love, and it's the city we want to make better.
Awesome. I'll definitely check in. So where do they get that again?
Told You So .media.
See that? See, we've never there's always so much to talk
about.
I know. So anyways, weather's going to be great. Get out. If you have a kayak or a canoe or a beach blanket or anything, get out and try to check out the water. In and around Manchester, there's a beach at Massabesic. You can't go in the Massabesic, but there is a little bit of a beach there. We have swimming pools. There's Crystal Lake, which I don't think I've ever been to, nor do I ever think I want to, but that's beside the point. There always seem to have E. coli issues and things, and it's just not my thing. But you can go up. There's all sorts of little nooks and crannies in Manchester and parks that have great shade. Have a picnic, sit out and enjoy it up. That's all I got. We're running out of time. If you have any questions, reach out to us at ManchTalk@gmail.com. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, guys.